Hey guys, welcome back to another lesson. Now today we're going to be discussing while loops. Now in the previous lesson we have already discussed what a for loop is and how to use it. And a for loop would be used when you're looping through an iterable, or an object that can be iterated over, such as a string, a list, tuple, etc. Now a while loop is different. A while loop would be used to keep on looping until a certain condition is met. So for example, if we wanted to loop through a string until we find the letter S, then we will continue to loop until we come across the letter S. Otherwise, we're going to keep on looping forever. So let's first create a while loop. So just like the for loop, we first had to type in our while keyword. And now we have to have our condition. So let's just say while 1 plus 1 equals 2, and then we're just going to print something to the terminal. So this condition is always going to be true. So since it's always going to be true, we're going to keep on looping forever and ever. And that's one thing to note about using while loops. When you're using a while loop, unless a condition is false, the loop is just going to continue to keep on going over and over repeatedly. And that is actually bad for your program because then at some point, your program or app is going to break. So we do not want our program to keep on looping over and over again. But for example purposes, this is what we're going to do, and so what we should see is great being printed to the console over and over again. So if I run this, then we keep having great right here. So actually let's quit this by hitting Control C in the terminal, and let's clear all of that. So this is essentially how you can use a while loop. Now anyhow this condition right here was false, then we would actually not be printing great to the terminal. So let's say 1 plus 3, well 1 plus 3 does not equal 2, it actually equals 4. So if we run this, we get nothing because, well, it just can't execute whatever's in the while loop because this condition right here is false. So that's how you use the while loop. Now let's take a look at a great use case where the while loop would be really useful. So here is the use case we're going to be looking at, and that is getting a number from the terminal. So now we have already looked at how a user can input data into the terminal. So let's first go get data from the user, and we're going to create a variable and call it user input. And then we're going to use our input function right here, and we're going to prompt the user, enter a number. Now let's say that we want to add 5 to our user input. Well, to do that, we can easily just do user input equals user input plus 5. And of course, we can use the shorthand notation, so let's do that instead because this way is just too long. And we can also do user input because we have to convert this to an integer. So we're going to do user input like that. So right here we are converting user input into an int. And then right here we are adding 5 to our user input. So we're getting user input from the terminal, then we're converting it to an integer, then we're adding 5 to it. So now you can see that there's a slight problem here. And the problem is that our user can actually enter anything into our program. It doesn't have to just be a number. So for example, let's run this. It says enter number. So if we put a into our program right here, we get an error because, well, a is just not an integer, so we cannot convert the letter a into an int. So how are we ever going to fix this problem? Well, one way is by using the while loop to keep on checking if the input that the user entered is actually an integer. So what we can do here is now we can create our while loop. So while user input is numeric. And what this means is that if the data entered is only numbers, then we're going to keep on looping. And since we actually want to check if it's not only numbers, then we're going to use the not right here. And then we can actually indent this because everything in Python has to be indented. So essentially what we're doing in this while loop right here is we're going to be checking if our user input is not a number. If it's not a number, then we're going to go into this while loop, then we're going to ask the user to enter a number. And if it's still not a number, then we're going to keep on looping until they actually give us a number. Then once we get the number, we're going to convert our number into an integer. Then we're going to add 5 to it. Then we're just going to print it to the terminal. So your number plus 5 is, and then we can use a dot format method. And then we can just do user input like that. So now our program is almost done. Now there's just one slight error with this, and that is we're initializing our user input variable inside this while loop. Now that might seem fine, but since we're using user input right up here, then we can't actually be creating it in here because we actually need it up here. So to fix that, we are first going to have to create user input up here. And we are just going to create a string, and it's going to have whatever. We're just going to create a string. So now what we're doing is we have our user input and it's initialized but it has nothing in it. Then we're going to go to this while loop and we're going to be checking if it's not numeric. So if it's not a number, and of course this is just not a number, so we're going to go into here. It's going to ask us to enter a number, and then if we don't give it a number, then we're going to loop again. It's going to ask us to enter a number. So that might sound like a lot, but let's just go and run this code. So first things first, it says enter a number. So let's do the letter A. And now it says enter number. If we do FG, it does not work. It wants a number. So once we give it a number, like 23, now it should work and it should give us 28. And we have a little bug right here. And here's my mistake. I forgot to put in our curly brackets. So let's run that again. It says enter number. We enter A, but now if we enter 23, we should get 28. And that's exactly what we get. So our program is working. So this is how you would use the while loop. You would only use the while loop to keep on looping until a certain condition is met. In this case, we're going to continue to loop until our user input is only a number and nothing else. So keep on playing with this, guys, and I'll see you in my next lesson.